Philosophical reflection on time is usually polled between two rival models. The first is presentism, the assumption that only the current moment exists, sliding forward and turning the future into the past. The rival model is the block universe, favored by eternalists. In this view, past, present, and future are all equally real, locked into a completed four-dimensional structure. These two models disagree about which parts of time exist, but they share a quiet, deeper assumption that physical events are arranged inside a fundamental dimension of time. The philosophy of Changism rejects that shared assumption entirely. We do not live inside a temporal container. Treating time as a physical stage forces us to invent flowing presents or frozen blocks to explain how events occur. To understand reality, we must drop the container and look strictly at change itself. Changism begins with a concept called the field in act. Reality is not an inventory of static substances that occasionally move. It is a single, ongoing field of differential change. What we perceive as solid physical things, particles, organisms, objects, are simply stabilized regimes of co-change. They are localized patterns maintaining coherence within this active field. If reality is pure change, then time is the representational system we use to order it. Time operates as a ledger, a numerical tracking system extracted by comparing how these different patterns pulse and interact. The physical interaction between patterns is the objective reality. The metric we derive from it is a mathematical abstraction. Time is not a cosmic substance. It is a derivative tool we extract to compare how physical processes relate to one another. This distinction between physical change and temporal measurement originates in antiquity. Aristotle was the first to rigorously treat time not as a substance, but as a dangerous concept that generates contradictions if reified. He defined chronos strictly. Time, he wrote, is the number of change with respect to the before and after. It is the act of counting motion. The logic is absolute. Without active physical change to compare, the temporal measurement ceases to exist. By the 3rd century BCE, the Stoics had formalized this strict division between the physical world and temporal measurement. The Stoic Chrysippus defined diastema, an incorporeal interval corresponding to the motion of the cosmos. In Stoic physics, an incorporeal is a structural accompaniment that lacks any physical causal power. Physical bodies do the actual work of colliding and acting. Time operates purely as an incorporeal tag used to calculate rates of fast and slow. Ancient philosophy correctly identified time as a comparative measure. Their only error was assuming a single massive master clock, the motion of the whole cosmos, dictated the standard for the universe. In the 20th century, process philosophers like Alfred North Whitehead attempted to revive this change-first perspective by replacing static substance with creative novelty. Whitehead built his system on actual occasions, discrete events completing a process of becoming, passing influence to the next occasion. But by relying on succession as a primitive scaffold, the temporal container is smuggled back into reality's architecture. A rigorous change-first ontology must strip away primitive sequence entirely. Temporal order is a derived ledger, extracted from comparing records, not the underlying engine of reality. Modern physics enforces this discipline. Albert Einstein's theories of relativity completely shattered the Newtonian and Stoic concept of a global master clock. Relativity proves there is no observer-independent global simultaneity. Time is reduced to a localized parameter used to compare individual changes. Clocks do not measure an invisible time fluid. They count their own internal cyclical changes. Physics refers to this accumulated internal tally as proper count. The universe operates as a tempo field, where mass and velocity alter the local cadence of processes. When systems take different paths through this warped field, their internal ledgers integrate at different rates. Upon reuniting, their tallies physically differ. The global positioning system relies entirely on this reality. GPS is a satellite network used for navigation, and it functions by mathematically federating divergent local ledgers to maintain coherence across different altitudes and speeds. Relativity strictly forbids a physical time container. Time exists entirely as a mathematical reconciliation of disparate local changes. At the subatomic scale, quantum mechanics attacks the same container misconception by rejecting a universal, observer-independent state of the world. In this framework, the wave function, a mathematical description of the quantum state of an isolated physical system, is not a literal inventory of reality. It is a localized predictive ledger kept by one physical system about another. What we call a quantum measurement is simply an admissible physical meeting or coupling between two patterns in the field. Wave function collapse is not a global metaphysical event. It is a localized ledger update that occurs the moment systems actually meet and exchange stable marks. Physics at all scales demands we abandon the view from nowhere. Reality is a network of localized interacting patterns maintaining independent comparative ledgers. The thing is no temporal container and no global now, a central paradox remains. What makes our use of past, present, and future objectively true? In Changism, tenses are not spatial regions of existence. They are functional roles played by physical structures existing within the one ongoing field in act. We begin with the present role. The present is the exact role of ongoing interaction and registration between physical systems. It is the living interface where marks are made. Once the interaction concludes, it transitions to the past role. The past does not exist in a metaphysical warehouse behind us. Past tense truths are grounded entirely in physical traces, scars, and records that exist right now. Grounding past tense truths in present physical records solves the logical paradoxes of a moving now, while completely avoiding the bloated, frozen inventory of the block universe. Finally, we have the future role. The future is the set of standing dispositions, constraints, and physical potentials anchored entirely in the current configuration. It is not pre-written, and it is not a destination waiting to happen. It is structurally constrained by the current state of the field, records, activity, and dispositions. The past, present, and future operate simultaneously as functional roles without the need for a timeline. To understand this, we must visualize reality purely as action. Reality is not in time, it is in change. Time is simply the bookkeeping we invent to track the world's continuous interactive becoming.